Brilliant. So our last speaker for this session before the wrap-up and summary is Beniel Thileepan from the University of Warwick. Apologies if I said that incorrectly. Who's going to talk to us about, there's an acronym, OPS-HLS, which I'm sure we'll hear more about, automated code generation for FPGA-Accelerated Stencil solvers. So thank you very much.
Thank you. You spelled the name correct. So this work, OPS-HLS, is part of a collaborated work in between Warwick and CoSeC University, like in Saudi Arabia. So I'm a final year student, finally a PhD student. Soon I'm gonna get kicked out, but thanks to my supervisors, like we able to publish this work a couple of weeks ago in PAC conference in US. Sorry. So our motivation is stencil computation, which is based on finite difference method. So far many work have been talked about this, but I don't want to like give more insight to it. So, but I'm showing a very simple PD. Then with numerical approximation schemas, we convert it to iterative mode. So the special this sort of numerical solutions have kind of a very nicely defined stencils. So one of the interests is in our motivation is to use this mode of like a locality in data to leverage into high order parallelization, and how we are going to leverage this well-defined locality. For example, in this case, across stencils, stencil is like iteratively computing its values based on its neighbor. You don't need to read anything else, so you can parallelize based on the stencil. But the problem is this is a very simple schema. There can be multi-stage schema with like bigger order as well. So I started to use this buzzword. You may be not familiar. So because of that, I'm skipping this and going forward a bit. So what is FPGA? So FPGA is a heterogeneous accelerator similar to GPU, but not similar to it. It is more like a transformer. So if you recall, if you have seen a transformer movie, these aliens can transform into anything they see. So FPGA is like a ASIC testbed, have DSPs, memory components, and everything floating in an interpose where you can synthesize your own hardware for your application. So with that in mind, the way of implementing an FPGA is to use hardware descriptive languages, or it's sometimes called RTL. These languages are describing how the hardware, the microarchitecture is going to be. So this sort of hardware is used in very low latency applications and more energy efficient applications, from space application, financial applications likewise. So they are more powerful in terms of packing more computation within the silicon than GPUs. But the problem is implementing these applications are very hard. You need to spend months to write an application, then verification takes even twice the amount you spend to develop an application. So not many try to do HDL implementation on scientific application, but recent times we are seeing high-level synthesis, which is a C++ like syntax. You define computational kernels and things in C++ friendly high-level abstractions, where you can define your scientific application or any high-level application in this mode, and you can create stencil application in FPGAs. So there are scientific works in past years like manually doing this process, achieving somewhat performance with less energy spending on implementation. So these are very competitive when it comes to energy, as well as in some applications they are very efficient in terms of, they are like competitive in terms of performance as well. But still, this is a big problem for application engineers. So no one going to learn these HLS synthesis tools to implement scientific applications. So code generating approaches were like emerging last couple of years, and even we can see it a bit further as well. But the problem with this code generating approach, they are not, you can use these APIs, code generating framework, but you cannot achieve performance. So that is where we were thinking, how can we achieve this? So that, with that in mind, I would like to differentiate with generic processors versus FPGAs. So in most of you have like implemented like good application solutions in GPUs, but most of the struggle comes to utilize cache, how we are going to properly parallelize, how we are going to tile, and every optimization so far done is on software level. You are not going to tweak the hardware processor like an hardware engineer. And the performance gain comes through properly handling this memory hierarchy and utilizing more cache hit in GPU and CPUs, even in a local systems or like a multi-node systems as well. But when it comes to FPGAs, you have kind of you are designing your own hardware, so you need to consider optimization in hardware, both on the FPGA fabric side, and also you need to consider software optimization where you communicate in between FPGA and host side. But the good news is FPGA provide more low-level custom memory architecture. You can fine-tune it exactly to fit your application, so you don't need to go through a generic architecture. In past works, there were like types of optimization. For example, a 3D stencil can be broken into one dimension where you read from a particular point from memory, but you don't need to read these values from that memory again, because you already put this data into the pipeline. So what you do is you use intermediate buffer inside FPGA fabric to propagate this data properly, and you are going to compute it without rereading from cache or near chip memory like RAM. Then this work we have seen in many scientific work, like you do in GPUs. You have multi-thread. It is called cell parallelization. But when you use even higher level terms, when you write a for loop or something, you call it loop unrolling. That means like you can parallelly process some cells without waiting for like going iteratively. So in this case, you are reading data in a widened format and you are processing them in this process unit. So this is called cell parallelism. One of the special type of optimization you can implement in FPGA, you cannot do this kind of optimization in GPU. That means iteration can be parallelized as well in GPU. For example, you read an input, you do like a stencil operation in a grid for a single iteration, then you connect next process element without going back to memory. So this kind of work have been already implemented in hand-coded applications. But how are we going to automatically code generate without compromising performance? So that is why we tend to go with a domain-specific language approach. So OPS is already been used in many applications in scientific domain. So we are going to use the same DSL and to extend its support to FPGA targets. So basically OPS have C++ and Fortran API interfaces where you have sort of declarative APIs, but with imperative settings. So that means like rest of your application can be pure C++, but your stencil operations can be abstracted with these declarative APIs. And you don't need to worry about whether you are running it on a multi-node supercomputer, whether you are running on NVIDIA GPUs or AMD GPUs. Rest of the part will be handled by OPS. So, for example, a naive C++ code for the stencil computation you have seen in my previous example can be translated into an OPS application just by separating the kernel as well as using some OPS APIs. Then our translator will generate CUDA code for you. So what we need to do, what we did on top of this is to take the existing OPS translator, but we need more layers to continue. So what we did was we used proper LLVM parsing techniques and also we had an optimizer. So I don't want to go in detail about this optimizer, but since FPGA works in a data flow domain, that means it's not like a instruction-based processor, you need to have proper circuit built before you run your application. So you should have like a data flow analysis type of optimization. These kind of like deep optimization layers need to be implemented. So we properly implement an optimizer platform inside the translator. While we implement some data flow parsers. For example, this is I'm not sure you can read the part. So here you have two kernels reading from one array, and you are processing a stencil computation here, then you are writing it to another array. Then finally, you are copying that value back to the original array. So if you are writing a kernel, a copy kernel, simple kernel, but with data flow analysis, you can detect these kind of simple kernels and make it an internal circuit. Then also there are cases you need to like reorganize your read and write into arrays in a proper data flow manner so that we can fit that in FPGA. So and in some cases, the dependency analysis is also very important to solve some crucial problems. We have discussed that in detail in the paper, but I'm just skipping that. But this kind of data flow optimization now can be done. Not limited to these three, we can even implement more parsers. So our next contribution mostly on how we are going to translate user-defined stencil into process element without any user input into it and in a fully automated manner. For example, here you see a 2D 5-point stencil. You read, so I think there are some artifacts are missing in this image. So you read, but the order of transfer matter, for example, here you first do transition from this cyclic buffer to this register, then you do this particular transfer. Likewise, the order does matter to have an optimal microarchitecture in FPGA. So most of the manual implementation, they do these things manually. But if you are automatically translating it, you need to formalize it. And if you do it wrong, you cannot have an optimal initialization interval. So this term is like initialization interval is like this clock cycle you need to push a new data into the data flow pipeline. So the best solution is each clock cycle you need to read a new data. So we formalize it and add it to the translator as a compiler pass. And from that, you can generate optimal microarchitecture, how you are going to pass, how you are going to connect this buffer. And also these buffer sizes can be defined based on the the maximum grid you are going to push through your the FPGA accelerator, as well as the stencil points. One of the additional work we did on top of existing literatures is like most of the literature, you have an host pushing data into FPGA. Mostly they have HBM or DDR. Then what do? Is they like read from this HBM and passes that value through like a process element chain, and then they write back to HBM. And here you have multiple process element. That means you can parallelize some iterations, but you cannot parallelize all of the iterations required. For example, this can be 10 iterations can be parallelized. But if you want to do 1,000 iterations, you go again and again in this cycle. So if you see it in a time Gantt chart diagram, in a timing diagram, you can parallelize your stencil operations. But as soon as you're writing back to the memory, it's a blocking operation, and you have some gaps. So if you can fix those, it is going to give more performance in small grid applications and low dimensional applications. So what we did was we introduced a loopback connection mechanism. This circuit allows you to read from local memory and again and keep that data within the circuit itself without writing back to the near chip memory like HBM or RAM. So this gives you some additional latency gain. And we also model it because the user need to be like deciding whether they are going to use loopback or traditional read and write architecture. So finally, we tested this new code translation mechanism with purely OPS written application, and we tested them on 2 different types of FPGAs. One is like Alveo U280, which is a bit bigger FPGA with 3 SLR, and Versal VCK5000 is a newer device, but it is slightly smaller, but it has some powerful DSPs. And we also compare this result, the results we had with code-generated FPGA design with OPS code-generated H100 results as well. So finally, we tested on 1D application, 2D applications, and 3D applications. I'm not going to go into much details, but I would like to go to summarize the results. We had like a significant number of improvement than optimized handwritten code, and we were able to outperform them almost across every application in both these devices. But when it comes to H100, for example, if I take these 2D applications, when you have low compute intensity kernels, FPGA perform better because GPU falls under like memory bounded region. So when you have a small kernel or memory bounded kernels, they perform better in FPGA. So they outperform, for example, GPU. Even this GPU implementation using batching as well, but we were able to outperform them without batching. And across every application, on average, we are 10 times power efficient. That's the big part. Like if we are running some application with energy constraint, FPGAs are best solution. Not only we limited ourselves on very simple kernels, we tested on like multi-stage stencil applications as well, RTM forward pass, a 3D application, which have 4th order Runge-Kutta schema with 25-point stencil. Even in that application, we were able to outperform handwritten implementation by significant number. And across this experimentation, we were able to find some bottlenecks in handwritten code. Finally, we tested on another application, PW advection. You guys have seen advection kernels, advection implementation in many other works today as well. Our implementation was able to outperformed 7 times than the previously best implementation in FPGA. So finally, with this code generation approach, we notice like we can develop faster. For example, heat, the diffusion, the heat application, heat diffusion application, the handwritten code took me to develop like more than a month. But with code generation, I could do it with 4 or 5 days. I can optimize and get the more optimized implementation. And also they are more robust. For example, previously handwritten code are not working properly with new toolings because FPGA toolings are evolving with crazy pace, and each time they come up with a new tool, it do not perform similar to the previous tool. And finally, we were able to optimize it with some model-based domain space exploration. And as you can see, we were matching with some of the handwritten code implementations, but also we outperform. For example, in Poisson 2D, a code generated version outperformed most of the handwritten previous state-of-the-art works. For our future direction is to extend this into multi-GPU environment, because as if you are familiar with Pedabone, Noctuna 2 supercomputers, they are now going for a FPGA-based cluster, which have a configurable network backbone. So you can connect multiple FPGAs together this way, like serial manner, or you can go for like a traditional GPU. You actually have domain decomposition. You are moving data based on that domain decomposition, but also you communicate in between FPGA via high-speed Ethernet connections. Finally, also we are working on automated domain space exploration, where optimization happens through reinforcement learned based approaches. That's it. So I already showcased how OPS-HLS framework successfully automated state-of-the-art FPGA designs. And also we showcase how it is promising in performance, but also they are easier to implement than hand-coded version. But also we able to showcase that they are very energy efficient. And this work is a partnership work with CAST, and I use their FPGA clusters. You can use these links to access artifacts, as well as you can read the pre-press work from this link. Thank you.
Brilliant, thank you very much. Have we got any questions? So I had a quick question. You spoke about how the automated code exposed some bottlenecks in some of the handwritten code. I'm wondering if you learned anything from the automated code that could guide sort of software practices, or could have applications in other areas for better using these FPGA architectures.
Yeah, one thing I noticed is like when the problem become bigger, for example, if you are familiar with descriptive, like these HLS course, HLS have lot of pragmas. So it has more pragmas than OpenMP or the other part, or like APIs. So if you place a wrong pragma, it could affect. Sometimes it works for some tooling, but a later version of tooling, it's not working. For example, some of the 3D application written by hand code written applications were implemented in 2019 tooling, but they are not achieving proper initial interval with new toolings because they misplaced. It's like human errors. So that is why you can do proper compile implementation to facilitate developers.
Yeah, that's really interesting. So you've sort of highlighted areas to really pay attention to. Yeah, brilliant.
Thanks.
Let's thank our speaker and all of our speakers today.